Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new sports debate video. So for today's video, we're going to be talking about the Brooklyn Nets. So the Brooklyn Nets got off to a little bit of a slow start at the beginning of the season, but as soon as they acquired James Harden and James Harden started to gel in with the team, they skyrocketed and they were the number one seed, or they were the number two seed for the majority of the year. And then there was a period of a time where they were the number one seed, but right now they're back to the number two seed. And the reason for that is because of the recent losing streak they have been on. They've lost 4 games in a row. Yesterday, they ended that losing streak to the Denver Nuggets, making a nice comeback from down 21 points. But still, there's definitely some concern with that because they were down 21 points at some point during that game. So, what do we think is the reason for this struggle that the Nets have been on recently? So, Jared, what do you think?
Right. So James Harden, obviously, his injury is huge. The original trade, they gave up a lot of talent for James Harden. And I'm not saying the trade wasn't worth it. I think it was a great trade overall. Now with such a great core of your roster all working together is great. But at the same time, this one injury prevents, possibly two other talented players coming in instead of one extremely talented player. But there are other aspects that are affecting the Brooklyn Nets, obviously, other than James Harden. Of course, that is a huge piece of their recent struggles, but I also think it's important to look at how often their roster has changed, their starting roster. Their starting roster has, I can't remember the exact number, but I know it's an extremely high number where they've had a bunch of different people starting each game and a bunch of different lineups starting, and it's not exactly the ideal way to gain chemistry with the starting roster, who are going to be the people who are going out there and playing the most minutes each game. So I think part of the chemistry, part of the team chemistry could be another reason as to why they've been struggling recently. It is a relatively newer team, but obviously they've gone through almost an entire season now. But with the injuries of certain players not being able to be there as on-court leaders, obviously they can still be off-court leaders. But I do think it would be a different experience having them on the court, being able to almost be like a second coach with James Harden could be because of how experienced and talented he is. But yeah, as I was saying, I think chemistry is a big part of this team's struggle as well because of how many different people. Obviously, the roster isn't a different size, but the amount of times the roster has been changed, and even if it affects a player who believes they should be starting, if somebody thinks that they should be starting over somebody else, it could cause them to feel upset about something, and maybe they don't play their best, which I would hope is not the case, obviously, but I think the roster changes are another big part on top of James Harden's unfortunate injury that are giving this team struggle through the end of the season. However, I have heard that James Harden is projected to come back before the playoffs, which would be great because they can definitely make a deep playoff run, if not win it all.
Yeah, so everything Jared said, I have to agree with. I mean, to add on to his point about the chemistry, as Jared said, there's been so many different starting lineups this season. I don't know the exact number either, but I believe they're top five in the league with the amount of different starting lineups they've had this season. And, with all the injuries they've had as well, Kevin Durant has missed a lot of time. He missed 22 or 23 games with that hamstring injury. Kyrie's missed a couple of games throughout the season, not because of injury, but because of his, personal reasons he's been out. And James Harden, as Jared mentioned, has missed the last couple of games as well. So, and then not to mention the trade to get James Harden. You had to give up Jared Allen and Caris LeVert, who have been on the team for a long time, and your two of your most familiar players with the organization. You had to give up them as well. So many different guys now being on the floor at the same time. Especially your big three, right? James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. I believe they only played 7 or 8 games together this season. And these are the guys you're going to have to rely on. If you want to win it all, these guys not only have to be healthy, but they have to be on the court together getting some chemistry. How can they impact each other? How can they improve each other? How can they, make sure that they can continue to win games? Because I believe the biggest reason as to why the Nets were on this 4-game losing streak is because they didn't have enough offense to make up for their lack of defense. I mean, the Nets, as we know, are one of the worst defensive teams in the entire league. And the whole point is that the Nets were, at least the Nets are hoping for, is that the offensive firepower with, obviously you can call this the most talented trio of all time. It's definitely up there as one of the most talented trios of all time, and they would hope that these three can big enough offense to make up for the lack of defense. But with James Harden out, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant just weren't able to do that. They've gotten off to slow starts, and they weren't able to come back, with the exception yesterday of the comeback win against the Denver Nuggets. And another thing to add on about James Harden, he makes everyone around him better. I mean, Kevin Durant, you can call him the best player on the team. You can call Kyrie the most skilled player on the team, but James Harden is the most valuable player for the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, what he does it all. He can drive. I mean, we all know about his offensive game. He can shoot from deep, drive in the lane, mid-range floater, and his rebounds. I mean, one of the biggest struggles for the Nets this season is defensive rebounding. They've given up many second chance opportunities, but James Harden has 8 or 9 rebounds a game this season. So he's obviously a big rebounder, and his assists. I mean, before he was injured, he was leading the whole entire league in assists and average assists per game. So I mean, he just knows how to read a defense. He just knows how to conduct an offense. That's why he's the point guard of this team. And he just knows how to make everyone better. And I think without him, the Nets are not going to win a championship. But as Jared mentioned before, James Harden is projected to come back before the playoffs. And if that is true, and if he is going to come back and he's going to be healthy, then I think the Nets are going to be fine. Because the reason as a Nets fan, and I'm not concerned is because James Harden wasn't here. I felt like James Harden was here these last couple of games. We may have won these couple of games. But, with James Harden not being there, I can see there might still be some concern about defense because obviously, defense wins championships. And how is this going to translate over to the playoffs? But I still want to see James Harden. If James Harden was here, then I'll be concerned. I'll be very concerned. But since he's not there, I'm still not concerned yet. Jared, what do you think?
Yeah, I am also on the same page as you with James Harden's serious impact that he has on this team in all the different ways that he possibly can. And I do think it would be very important for him to come back in the playoffs. And like you mentioned, how the big three of this Nets team really has played barely any games together is crucial because a lot of money was put into, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. I believe they both have max contracts.
Yeah.
That gives up a lot of other potential talent who could have been playing. Kyrie Irving with the taking time off, Kevin Durant's injury, and now James Harden's injury. 3 of them separately, not all playing together, is crucial. Even just to build chemistry for the future. These guys are all on contracts and here to stay, as it seems, but with their lacking chemistry of actually being on the court together, hopefully it won't be too big of a problem, but I can see where it could raise future problems.